Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh. 5 months of relentless shelling and missile strikes hasn't brought Russia and Ukraine any closer to the negotiating table. If anything, things have actually gotten worse on the battlefields of the Donbas region. A missile strike on the city of Kramatorsk on the 7th of July claimed 1 life and injured 6 others. The images of these burning cars and shattered homes will give you a glimpse of the havoc that's been wreaked by the war on civilians. And even those who had hoped that the hostilities would end soon are losing hope. Most people have already fled to the safer zones of western Ukraine, and only the poor and the desperate who have no other home to seek refuge in have stayed back in the line of fire.
It was such a big explosion that me and my wife, who were sitting inside our home, felt that everything flew up into the air. She got down on the floor and started crawling. We didn't even hear the sound of something flying above. I have no idea if it exploded by itself, but the explosion was so massive that all the windows shattered.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine has sparked a wave of ill feeling against Russia and its symbols. In Latvia, nearly about 300 Soviet-era monuments will be demolished in the span of the next 4 months in what is bound to be an emotionally charged exercise that will draw the ire of the Kremlin and also the Russian speakers within the Baltic states. This giant victory memorial in central Riga, with a 79-meter obelisk built to commemorate the triumph of Soviet Union over Nazi Germany during the Second World War, will be one of those monuments that will be obliterated. But these growing anti-Russia feelings have had little effect on Vladimir Putin and his war machine. Speaking at the Russian parliament, Vladimir Putin accused the West of fueling hostilities against Russia. He also slammed the Western rhetoric and declared that Russia hadn't even started its war in earnest and is ready to fight till the last Ukrainian.
We are hearing that they want to defeat us on the battlefield. What can I say? Let them try. We have often heard that the West wants to fight us until the last Ukrainian. It's a tragedy for the Ukrainian people, but it looks like it's heading in that direction. But everybody should know that, largely speaking, we haven't even yet started anything in earnest.
After the capture of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, Russia has now turned its attention to the cities of Sloviansk and Bakhmut. Russian shells have rained down from the sky, smashing and reducing entire neighborhoods to rubble. Tetiana Demidova, who managed to escape from the Russian shelling, tells us what it was like to be caught in the crossfire.
The things happening back there, they destroyed everything. Helicopters were shooting at streets there and back. Helicopters, planes, cannons, tanks. One could not even go behind the gates. It was impossible to go to the garden to pick vegetables. As soon as one went outside, shelling started. It was impossible to get water. There was shelling straight away.
In its turn, Ukraine has been hitting Russian-controlled city of Donetsk with heavy shelling. On the 5th of July, large plumes of smoke were seen rising from Donetsk as the Ukrainians hit targets including a technical facility that built the Russian Kamaz trucks. According to reports, several people have been killed in Donetsk as a result of Ukrainian shelling. The Snake Island, strategically important in the Black Sea due to its proximity to the key port city of Odessa, has been a subject of intense claims and counterclaims this week. Ukraine claims that it ousted the Russians from the Snake Island and also destroyed the military infrastructure that Russia had established there after capturing the island in February. But Russia claims that it had withdrawn from the Snake Island as a gesture of goodwill to open a humanitarian corridor to allow grains to be shipped out of Ukraine. And to prove that Ukraine now controls the Snake Island, the Ukrainian army also released this video of its soldiers raising its flag on the Snake Island. Western military aid is making its way into the hands of the Ukrainian soldiers in Donbas. These videos that have been tweeted by the Ukrainian military on the 4th and the 5th of July show the difference these heavy weapons can actually make on the battlefield. But for Ukraine, that is hoping to turn the tide of this war, time is fast running out. So even as the war in Ukraine rages unabated, there are other theatres of war that have erupted. On the 2nd of July, the State of Israel claimed that it had managed to shoot down 3 unarmed Hezbollah drones that were launched from Lebanon and were headed to the Karish gas fields in the Mediterranean, which is partly claimed by Lebanon. Now, according to the Israeli military, one of the drones was intercepted by a fighter jet, while the other 2 were shot down by missiles that were launched from an Israeli warship. In Uzbekistan, deadly violence has rocked the capital Nukus of the autonomous Karakalpakstan province. At least about 18 people have been killed and over 243 others have been injured when people took to the streets in a rare display of defiance against the government's proposed amendment to the Uzbek constitution that seeks to change the status of Karakalpakstan from an autonomous republic with the right to secede to an ordinary province of the country. This is the worst political violence that Uzbekistan has witnessed since the 2005 Andijan massacre. China is preparing itself for a new war. This is a war to control the minds of its own people, and it's as unconventional as it gets. The government wants to sense the mood of every individual at all times. The Chinese government wants to know what makes people happy and what they approve of and what they disagree with. And armed with this data, Beijing can suddenly decide to penalize you if the government were to find out that you do not wholeheartedly support the government's policies. Does this strike to you as an Orwellian, all-powerful dystopian surveillance state? Because that is precisely what this is, and it's a reality that people in China will have to live with in the days to come. To be clear, this is very different from China's notorious and all-pervasive surveillance, coupled with its draconian credit system. In fact, this is way worse. This is a new project that China is bringing about for the Communist Party workers to begin with. For Xi Jinping, loyalty is the greatest virtue. And to achieve this, the Chinese researchers have combined surveillance cameras with AI tools to read the minds of the Communist China Party workers and to make them more receptive to political education. So does this sound far-fetched to you? Well, this is how Xi Jinping is going about reading the minds of his own party workers. The Chinese Communist Party workers will be subjected to party propaganda material on the internet. They'll be constantly monitored through surveillance cameras, and then AI, artificial intelligence, will decide how engaged they were while reading through the party's plans and policies. Any hint of disapproval on their faces of government policies will land them in trouble. The organization behind this new mind control project is the Hefei Comprehensive National Science Center. And this grand plan was launched on the 1st of July this year on the foundation day of the Chinese Communist Party. The Communist Party of China already has an indoctrination app called the Study Xi to Make China Strong, where 96 million Communist China Party members are expected to earn points by reading articles and watching videos. Each party member must earn a minimum of 40 points per day by reading at least 4 articles, each of which would take about 4 minutes to read, and then by watching 3 videos whose duration would be at least 9 minutes per video. Failure to do this on a day-to-day basis will result in pay cuts for party workers. Now, this app was a roaring success in China. It was downloaded more than 100 million times in just the first quarter of its release in 2019. Much of the content on the app includes speeches, travels, and also some interesting quotes of Xi Jinping. Even school students haven't been spared this propaganda. Learning about Xi Jinping is now a part of school curriculum, and students earn extra credits by familiarizing themselves with party propaganda. These types of indoctrination apps track the amount of time that each user spends on these apps. For the common Chinese people, this is a way of getting ahead under the communist regime. So a lot of people in China are downloading and spending time on these indoctrination apps simply to earn the favor of the government. When China rolled out the dubious social credit system in 2014 that monitored the behavior of people through mass surveillance cameras and awarded or deducted social credits, people around the world thought that the Chinese government had gone too far. The system of awarding social credits is opaque, and some of the rules are totally random. Things like bad driving, or smoking in a non-smoking zone, or even purchasing too many video games can result in social credits getting deducted. This then has real-life consequences, as people on the basis of their social credits can get barred from booking flight or train tickets. For people outside of China, this may appear baffling, but according to the Chinese government documents, at least about 9 million people have already been blocked from buying tickets for domestic flights, and about 3 million people have been blacklisted from purchasing business class tickets for offences as simple as loitering in front of the boarding gates. At your workplace, a low social credit score could mean getting passed over by subordinates for promotions and plum postings. A low social credit score can also have consequences for your children. Schools can deny admission to young kids on the basis of the social credit scores of their parents. And even vacations are fair game. Top hotels can deny you admission on the basis of your social credit score. By 2016, China had started to prepare a blacklist of its citizens. People would be notified before they were put on the blacklist, but they have the right to appeal in a court within 10 days of being served the notice. This is how China has controlled the behavior of millions of its people, with seemingly random rules that were monitored through a vast system of surveillance cameras. And now, China is making a new beginning. It wants to control what its people think and how their minds are conditioned. Now, in a free democratic society, sovereignty rests with the people, who can keep their government on its toes. But in China, in the absolute authoritarian setup under Xi Jinping, the government is content with not just controlling people's behavior, it now also wants to control their minds. Espionage is a game of cat and mouse that nations play endlessly to get an upper hand on the other. In the most high-profile allegation of espionage this week, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards have detained several foreigners, including the deputy head of the British mission in Iran. According to the Iranian state media, these foreign diplomats were taking earth samples from Iran's central desert, where the Revolutionary Guards had recently conducted their aerospace missile exercises. The Iranian state media has put out this grainy video of the British Deputy Ambassador Giles Whittaker and his family in central Iran, where the British diplomat appears to be taking some ground samples. The Iranian security personnel have also recovered the ground samples that had been collected by the diplomats from Iran's central desert from near the rocket launch site. On the 26th of June, Iran, remember, had launched a solid-fueled rocket into space from the Imam Khomeini spaceport from the rural Semnan province. It also put out this pretty dramatic video of its satellite that's been named Zoljaneh blasting off from the ground. The Zoljaneh can carry a payload of about 220 kilograms and can launch a satellite into an orbit that can have an altitude of 500 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Now, pure solid fuel rockets are mostly linked to ballistic missile systems, but Iran insists that its rocket program is meant only for research purposes, and it has no intention of weaponizing its space program. No further details have been given by Iran about this space launch, but it has naturally attracted the attention of the Western nations who are negotiating with Tehran to revive the nuclear deal of 2015. Western governments worry that satellite launch systems incorporate technologies that are interchangeable with those that are used in ballistic missiles capable of delivering a nuclear payload. Now, it was near this space launch site that the foreign diplomats were found taking ground samples. According to the Iranians, Giles Whittaker, the deputy head of Britain's mission in Tehran, was expelled from the city after he was made to tender an apology to the Iranians. But the British Foreign Office has been quick to issue a rebuttal. It insists that its diplomat in Tehran was not arrested, despite the video that has been put out by the Iranians. Samuel Heath, the British spokesperson to the United States, has claimed in a tweet that Giles Whittaker is not even posted in Iran anymore. The two other people in the video who were detained by the Iranians are the husband of the Austrian cultural attaché. Another individual who was also detained by the Iranians has been identified as Maciej Wolczak, a university professor from Poland who is visiting Iran as a tourist. In the past, Western governments have accused Iran of arresting people on charges of espionage only to get political concessions. But this time round, just when the nuclear talks appear to be on the verge of breaking down, the West is extremely concerned over the progress that Iran has made in its space and nuclear programs. And these arrests of very high-profile diplomats point to some pretty rough weather ahead between Iran and the West. The acquisition of a nuclear bomb by Iran will change the power dynamics of the Middle East. Not only will it spark off a new nuclear arms race, but it will also make the troubled region even more fraught with uncertainty. To be clear, Iran has always insisted that it is pursuing its nuclear program only for peaceful energy generation purposes. But no country so far that has enriched uranium to a purity of 60%, as Iran is widely believed to have done, has held back from acquiring a nuclear weapon. So the big question, of course, is how close is Iran to developing a nuclear bomb? Our next report gets you the answer.
The Iranian nuclear deal of 2015, also known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was a diplomatic victory for the United States. It allowed Iran to pursue nuclear technology for peaceful energy generation, but imposed strict restrictions on what Iran could do. As part of the deal, Iran had to reduce its stockpile of enriched uranium by 98%. Iran was allowed to enrich uranium to a purity of just 3.67%, reduce the number of centrifuges from 20,000 to 6,000. No enrichment to be allowed at the Fordow nuclear facility, Arak nuclear facility to be redesigned to not produce weapons-grade plutonium. In return, Tehran was guaranteed sanctions relief. But in 2018, Donald Trump lampooned this agreement as the worst negotiated deal in American history, and unilaterally pulled the United States out from the JCPOA, imposing crippling sanctions on Iran as part of his strategy of maximum pressure. In April 2019, the Trump administration also designated the Iranian Elite Revolutionary Guard Corps, a branch of the Iranian armed forces, as a terror organization. In turn, Tehran, in a calibrated manner, started to flout the clauses of the JCPOA. So how close is Iran to developing a nuclear weapon? According to the IAEA, at the present rate of sustained nuclear enrichment, Iran could have a nuclear weapon in a span of the next few weeks.
Since they are continuing with the process, well, then it's a matter of just a few weeks, let's say. Let's put it like that.
What has worried the IAEA more is the fact that in June 2022, Iran switched off 27 surveillance cameras. At present, these are the nuclear facilities that Iran has at its disposal. Iran is now said to be enriching uranium using hundreds of its advanced centrifuges at Natanz. It is also enriching uranium with more than 1,000 IR-1S centrifuges at Fordow, a plant buried deep inside a mountain. According to the IAEA, Iran presently has 2,500 kilograms of uranium enriched to various levels. About 17.5 kilograms of uranium is said to be enriched to 60% purity. To make a nuclear bomb, an estimated 25 kilograms of military-grade enriched uranium of 90% purity is required. And with the talks having faltered over America's reluctance to lift the economic sanctions and the tag of a terror organization to the elite Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, it is difficult to see what incentive Iran will have to return to compliance with the JCPOA. Diplomacy is the art of the possible. In its second year at the White House, the Biden administration has had two major diplomatic reversals so far. Firstly, with the botched Afghan withdrawal, and secondly, with the Ukraine war. Unless the United States is willing to do some hard-nosed negotiations of give and take, Washington may soon see a new nuclear flag fluttering on the Persian Gulf.
The scourge of mass shootings has gripped the most powerful country on the planet. It is failing with alarming regularity in ensuring the safety of its citizens, not to mention the rot of racism that continues to remain intertwined deep into the very fabric of its being. Our next report explores the menace of gun terror that Americans somehow simply can't seem to escape from.
America, the proverbial land of the free and home of the brave, has become a land of fear and home of the coffin. Even the 4th of July, Independence Day, is not safe from killers armed with the most expensive guns who unleash terror upon hapless, innocent citizens. Innocent Americans have become a daily hostage to murderous maniacs. This year, the 4th of July celebrations turned into a nightmare in an affluent Chicago suburb, Highland Park. A 21-year-old gunman, Robert Crimo III, dressed up in women's clothing to blend in with the crowd. He took up position on the roof of a shop overlooking the parade route. As the Independence Parade came within his sights, he fired over 70 shots indiscriminately from a Smith & Wesson semi-automatic rifle.
But we do believe Crimo pre-planned this attack for several weeks. He brought a high-powered rifle to this parade. He accessed the roof of a business via a fire escape ladder and began opening fire on the innocent Independence Day celebration goers.
In the ensuing mayhem, 7 people were killed and 30 others were grievously injured. The only purpose of this diabolical plan was death for the sake of death. Crimo had a history of mental illness, but that did not prevent him from getting access to one of the most effective death-dealing handguns in the modern armory.
We have no information to suggest at this point it was racially motivated by religion, or any other protected status.
Crimo for now has been charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder, which will ensure that he receives a life sentence without parole if convicted. What is incredible is the frequency with which these mass shootings are happening in America. The resultant sense of paranoia is straight out of a horror movie, not unlike those churned out by Hollywood itself. A few hours later, on the very same day in Philadelphia, scores of people enjoying a 4th of July fireworks show ran helter-skelter on hearing gunshots. A trail of strollers and other personal items strewn on the streets of Philadelphia narrated an eerily similar tale. 2 Philadelphia police officers on duty at the event suffered graze wounds. On 27th June, a 25-year-old black man, Jayland Walker from Akron, Ohio, was chased on foot and killed after an attempted traffic stop. He sustained more than 60 wounds, shot at by as many as 8 police officers. It is the latest spine-chilling murder by the US police of more often than not unarmed young black men. Yet another reminder of how prevalent racism is in the American police force.
His name is Jayland, and he's not a monster.
With 2022 being a midterm election year, gun control issues assume an even greater significance. Will Americans vote against guns on the 8th of November? Or will the Republicans stay defiant and peddle the recent case of the Copenhagen mall shooting to highlight that strict gun control laws don't necessarily work? In a country where civilians possess more arms than the military and law enforcement agencies combined, and where approximately 40,000 deaths a year are caused by firearms, according to the Gun Violence Archive website, no political party in America has the courage to stand up to the gun lobby, which effectively prevents legislation that might truly curb the possession of deadly guns.
People who have witnessed war from close quarters know that there is no glory and there are no laurels in war. There's only death, loss and destruction. In the last 5 months, Ukraine, despite its spirited resistance, has endured terrible suffering. So when the Ukrainian professor Marina Vyazovska won the Fields Medal, the Nobel Prize of Mathematics in Helsinki, the achievement was bittersweet.
Marina Vyazovska from EPFL.
Her sisters and her family members had to be evacuated from Kiev when Russia invaded in February, and home was no longer home. Now, Marina Vyazovska is only the second woman to win this prestigious prize, and life, she says, will never be the same again. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh. Thanks for watching. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.